All right. Looks like we're getting a good crowd together. And I want to say a special word of welcome to our folks who may be preparing for confirmation, reception, renewal of vows. I can see some of those faces among us. So welcome to you in particular. And Robbie, it is good to actually see you on a Zoom. I think you were driving when we had class there, so welcome.
That is correct, yes.
Yes.
Nice to see you.
Yeah. So welcome, and this morning we have the whole team here as we think about, talk about, ask questions around, and give you a roadmap for what Holy Week looks like this year. And so, you know, every year we undertake Lent and Holy Week. Each year we do it year by year. And our liturgical calendar, I like to think of it, I've displayed it in two ways for you, knowing that folks' brains work differently. Some people like to see the wheel, and you remember perhaps the godly play language of the long green growing season of ordinary time, purple that comes at Advent, white at Christmas, a stretch of Sundays after the Epiphany until we enter again into Lent, which is the place in which we find ourselves. I personally happen to like the spiral image of the liturgical calendar, because as I think about it like an auger. So if you think about an auger, if you're trying to dig down, you are on the same track, but you're going ever deeper. So you're going through the same process as you hopefully are being drawn more deeply into the heart of God. Hopefully that is what liturgy is doing for us. It is a stable structure on which incredible, unexpected encounters happen with God. So right now, we find ourselves in the season of Lent. What is Lent? What is Lent? And this is, somebody can unmute. So we know it's purple for our liturgical color fans. So Lent is that season that helps us remember Jesus's 40 days of being out in the wilderness, when he was tempted, challenged, and really, in a sense, sent out. So this is our liturgical corollary and parallel, during which time we are preparing ourselves for this week in which we find ourselves, Holy Week. And Lent is marked, the start of it, with Ash Wednesday, at which time we hear the words, "Remember that you are but dust, and to dust you shall return." Lent begins with Ash Wednesday, and I would suggest Ash Wednesday is perhaps, I know we often think of it as a reminder of our mortality, but I would wonder if it is not also a reminder of our identity, that we are these created creatures of God, and in the earthly ash that is inscribed on our foreheads, we remember our most fundamental identity. So we started with Ash Wednesday in Lent, and we find ourselves, after these 5 weeks, to be now at the Sunday of the Passion, or Palm Sunday. Father Noah.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. You will know what it looked like this year if you watched our 9 o'clock service, so I won't spend too much time explaining how we're going to do it this year, as some of my colleagues will as we look forward. But I just want to talk about Palm Sunday and the way in which it inaugurates this holiest of weeks, liturgically, theologically, and otherwise. Now, you know that it's red. We're into the red of Holy Week, the red of the martyrs, the red of the saints, times where we use that red color, times of the Holy Spirit. And so it's a strange mix of the red color itself of celebration and also death. We use it at both times. And the day itself of Palm Sunday holds both celebration and death within it, even in the title. The Sunday of the Passion, Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday being referring to that inaugural procession where they're walking into Jerusalem with the Liturgy of the Palms, and the Sunday of the Passion being the way in which we just ended the 9 a.m. service with the reading, the recitation of the story of Jesus's arrest, trial, crucifixion, death, and burial. So it's got both those things going on. And as I had sort of a cynical view that thought they added in the, go back for 1 second there, Elizabeth Marie. They added in the reading of the Passion when they realized people had stopped going to church throughout the Holy Week and just would skip to Easter. And that this was something that they said, well, they got to hear the story of his death before they can hear the story of his resurrection. But in all actuality, in my research, both components, the Liturgy of the Palms and the reading of the Passion, have since almost the beginning of Christianity, at least in the early centuries, been a part of that service. So it has always had that full and complicated and somewhat confusing feel to it, where you're celebrating at the beginning, and then by the end, everything is at the point of death. And so for us, we try to capture that through the liturgy of blessing palms, processing in, singing. If you've been in congregations before, there's in our congregation, they start outside. There's a progression of the service that's very celebratory into this very hard, heavy moments within the liturgy itself. And the last thing I'll say is another thing it does for us is allows us that all these Holy Week services do is really works hard liturgically to draw us into the story ourselves physically, not just hear the story, but you're responding to the readings. You are the crowd. You are waving your palm branches like the people were, thousands of years ago. And there are other ways in which that happens on Maundy Thursday and Good Friday and the Easter Vigil. But these are very participatory services, more so even than our traditional Sundays, our regular Sunday services on any given week. So it's really a special Sunday. It's a confusing Sunday. It's a full Sunday, and it sets the stage for the story that will then be replayed across the Triduum in slightly slower motion as we walk then physically, literally, and also theologically all the way to the cross, the tomb, and then over to Easter Sunday as well. So it's one of my favorite Sundays, and I hope you're able to join us. If you missed it this morning, it's available to you after this class. You can watch it on our YouTube channel. But I'll throw it back to you, Elizabeth Marie, and happy to answer people's questions about Palm Sunday when we're ready.
All right, so let's turn now to the Triduum. So the Triduum is one service, and I think often we think of it as 3 different services: Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, and the Easter Vigil. So that you'll hear the prefix tri, the 3 days. The service that begins with opening sentences on Maundy, Thursday is not concluded until the first Eucharist of Easter is celebrated. So in previous years, you might have experienced here, we've had one service leaflet that you would pick up on Maundy, Thursday, and use the same one on Good Friday and the same one at the Vigil, because there is no dismissal on Thursday, moving into Friday, moving into the Vigil. So it is a reminder to us of the unitive nature of these 3 services that are upcoming this week. And I wonder, Mary Kat, if you might talk to us some about Maundy, Thursday.
Yeah, I would love to. So Maundy Thursday is the first of the Triduum, as Elizabeth Marie shared with us. And that word Maundy comes from the Latin mandatum, or to give, to order, mandate, right? And so this is where we hear the story of Jesus giving a mandate, not only to his closest disciples, but a mandate that is a call to us as well, that we love one, that I give a new commandment to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. And so there are three different actions that Jesus gives to us, or mandates, or passes on, or invites us to carry forward from that we look at and that we explore and experience on Maundy Thursday. The first of these is that in our liturgy, the first one that occurs is the foot washing. And in the foot washing, Jesus does an action that is humbling of himself before his colleagues, before those. If he was the master or the teacher, these would have been his pupils, and yet the master puts himself at the feet of his students and says, I'm going to do for you that which a servant would normally do, because this is what leadership looks like in my name. It is a loving, humble act of service and an invitation to you as my followers who are going to go on and carry forward sort of the leadership I'm teaching you by learning how to do this act for each other and how to offer this act to others, to invite other people into this kind of servant leadership. And so there is the foot washing. And on this Thursday, as we provide a virtual worship service, we are going to provide time and an invitation to you all in your households, in your homes, in whatever community that you're able to be with. If you are able to and would like to, a few moments to actually do a foot washing between yourself and, again, others that may be with you. So there'll be a time actually in the service where there's a few minutes with music where you can take the time to either reflect on what that must have been like in the moment, or to you yourself participate. And so you may want to have some elements nearby, a basin of water, some towels, if that's an act that you want to enact in your own home liturgy with us. The second act that Jesus calls his servants into, and his disciples, is that of the Holy Communion. And again, we do this in our worship life as a community, and we will do this in the service as it continues on Maundy Thursday. And that is the liturgy of the table, the act of taking bread and wine, of giving thanks, of blessing it and breaking it and sharing it. So that holy act and that mandate, that invitation, that community action that we are called to carry forth Jesus' legacy in the way that we commune with one another, right? The way that we share a meal and remember Jesus' name in that time, and the way that we, again, share and invite that which is the communion that we take into ourselves to go out into the world with us. And so we have the foot washing, we have the Holy Communion, the Last Supper, the Liturgy of the Table. And then the last action that you will see us enact in the liturgy, and that you may have participated in the past if you are an altar guild person, or if you've been to an in-person liturgy, is the stripping of the altar. And what that looks like and what that is meaningful about is that this is the transition. This is sort of Jesus saying, okay, I've had this time with you, and something is about to change, something really significant. We know the end of that story. We know what's going to happen next. And so we prepare our space, in some ways, almost turning that which is a decorated, dinner table. We clear all of the dishes. We clear away all of the elements. We take away the candles. We are essentially creating a tomb. We are creating an empty sort of space because we are about to name and acknowledge, right, sort of that which was Jesus' sort of removal from the community. And so that's the liturgical action that you will experience, that you will see in our worship life together on Maundy Thursday. Another piece that can happen and does happen differently in different places, but following the liturgy of the stripping of the altar, is that a communion host, a wafer, is held back, is sort of kept with a burning candle lit, and set up in a space of altar of repose, or an altar of vigil, essentially, a space where we recognize that Jesus's body is still with us in that consecrated host. As you can see in this picture, sometimes that's a garden is created, And on Thursday, you'll see the way in which we will actually have a bit of an altar of repose in our actual physical garden outside of the church buildings, so that we have an acknowledgement that Jesus is still with us. Jesus' body is with us in that last part of the story before Good Friday, when he's in the garden praying with his friends and asking them to sit vigil with him, to stay awake with him in his last hours amongst them. And so that it will be an invitation that is extended to us, that we, again, take time to be in vigil, to be present, to praying with alongside of Jesus as he is himself preparing to be absent from us, to be removed from the community.
Could you not wait with me 1 hour?
Mm-hmm.
As he asks in the garden. Thank you. Amanda, you want to take us to Good Friday?
Absolutely, yes. So, Good Friday. So I want to just start with like why it's called Good Friday, because it seems like a contradiction. So this is the second service in the Triduum. As Mary Kat and Elizabeth Moon have said, there's no dismissal from Maundy, Thursday. So Good Friday is part of that one long service. And it's the time in which, of course, we remember Jesus' death and crucifixion and the grief of the cross. So why do we call it good? And I think perhaps the best way to talk about it is that it's good because it is good for us and it is good for all of humanity, and it is good for God in the way that it's some people describe it as sort of taking a second stab at creation, right? There's lots that happens in Genesis, the world sort of gets messed up with sin, and this is the chance for God to redeem all of that. And so it is painful, and there is a lot of grief, and also it is a good thing ultimately. So that is, I think, one explanation for why we call it Good Friday, because it is redemptive. So the stripping of the altar sort of moves us from Maundy, Thursday into Good Friday, and that's everything is taken off of the altar, out of the space, everything that's unnecessary. And if you look actually at the Good Friday service, you'll also see that the liturgy, all of the sort of frills of the liturgy are taken off. For instance, the Passion is read again, this time according to the Gospel of John. But there are no responses before or after the Gospel, as you would normally have. So it's stripped back, it's readings, it's the Passion, it's the solemn collects, and a brief homily. The other thing that's missing from this service in our context is that there's no communion. So sometimes you'll see some churches that do communion from the reserved sacrament. And in this, and we actually don't do it because we're remembering that we're living into this time where Jesus is not here. At noon when the service is happening, Jesus would be hanging on the cross. And so we're living into this day where Jesus is dying and is absent. And so there is no communion. So what we're doing for this year, I already mentioned that there's no communion. The service doesn't end with a dismissal, just with prayers, because it's part of the Triduum. We're doing a live stream service at noon. And then there's an additional opportunity, a couple of opportunities to further live into this day, the sort of stillness and quietness of that day, hopefully the prayerfulness as well. So we have 3 opportunities at 1, 2, and 3 to walk the stations of the cross. And if you've never walked the Stations of the Cross before, it's a series of readings and prayers and passages that literally follow that journey in the Gospels from Jesus's trial all the way to the moment of death. And if you Google it, you will often see sort of sets of images. This is a really common theme in artwork, is to do these Stations of the Cross in sort of sacred space. And I think one of my other colleagues will have to remind me whose artwork we will have up. Elizabeth Marie, do you know off the top of your head?
We'll have a set that of stations that the church owns that we'll be putting up outside around the church campus. So it won't be indoors, but it'll be outdoors for us to walk around as a group.
Yes, so there's an opportunity to do that, to register in advance for that at 1, 2, or 3. And then we'll also have the wooden cross outside in the churchyard. And for some people, I think this is a really lovely way of sitting and coming and meditating on the death of Christ. So if you would like to come and venerate the cross, or simply just come and hold this as a time of prayer, you are most welcome to do so.
Thank you, Amanda. Now, Amanda, if people wanted to sign up for those Good Friday stations, you think that's something you could put in the chat in case there's, upon hearing that opportunity and folks maybe didn't realize that was happening?
Sure.
They might. Thank you.
I'll the registration in the chat right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we turn to our Easter Vigil. So the Vigil is the final component of that Triduum service. And a Vigil traditionally has 4 elements. You have the lighting of the new fire. And that lighting of the new flame outdoors, the chanting of the Exultet, it reminds us of that Johannine image of light pervading the darkness, piercing the darkness not being able to overcome that new light of Christ, which is lit, shared, stoked at Easter. So the service begins with the lighting of the new flame. The service continues with readings and responses, reading, a response in music, and then a collect. There are up to 9 readings that give this sense of the Ark of Salvation history, of the ways in which God has shown up for God's people, God has chosen God's people, God continues to sustain and carry forward God's people. So, lighting of the new fire, readings, renewal of vows. So we renew our own baptismal covenant. We reaffirm these 6 promises for how we will care for creation, turn towards God, seek and serve Christ in all people, respect the dignity of every human being, how we will do all of this with God's help. And then the vigil concludes with breaking of the bread, the sharing of the first Paschal feast that will take place at Easter. And this year, as we approach the Easter Vigil, we felt that we wanted to share that first Eucharist of Easter physically embodied with our community. So that first Eucharist of Easter will take place on Easter Day at our earliest 7:30 service. So it's as if the concluding act of the vigil will take place finally on Easter morning. So that it's this beautiful arc of coming from death to life. And for me, I think pastorally, liturgically, symbolically, it is really powerful for that sign of life to happen physically amongst our gathered congregation, gathered outdoors, able to share in communion of the body and that real presence, again, as we share real presence with one another. So I want to invite now a time of questions. And this is consider this your free-for-all questions. You might have wondered a question since you were 7. So I don't want to hear anybody say, I would invite you not to say, I know this is a dumb question, but, or I know I should know this, but just, I would invite you to ask any questions that you might have, either about our liturgical year and the deep layering of symbolism that we have, layer upon layer, as we move through this. Really, it's a drama through which we move each year, and we are invited to inhabit that drama. So I don't know about you all as you watched our service this morning, but as we were hearing the Liturgy of the Passion, and it came time for the part of the crowd to say, crucify him. Like, there was this feeling of that kind of swept upness of the power of pronouncing. So this is drama, and even though many of us are experiencing this drama, perhaps mediated through the internet, you still, I think, can feel it and be swept up in this arc of the story of salvation history. So questions either about the liturgies of Holy Week and about how those liturgies will look this year in particular. So we've got 2 screens of folks, so I would invite you to unmute yourself and ask away.
So I'm curious about how long has it been since the Triduum has been celebrated in its current form? Is that going back a couple thousand years? Is that the last 100 years?
Noah.
That's a great question, Mike. It actually is sort of a condensed form of what in the earliest centuries of the church was sort of a week-long reenactment of these events in Jerusalem. So if you go to Jerusalem now, maybe not this year, but in many years, they do try to capture that same thing, and they do walk the way of the cross, the Via Dolorosa. There are crowds and crowds of people. The Easter Vigil, there are histories and stories of huge riots breaking out because this fire is swinging from this huge chandelier kind of thing in a church. And so the drama of these liturgies being done in the place where in our imaginations they took place dates back thousands of years. And this is our current iteration of them. The prayer book has taken them, and there's been some evolution over the evolutions of the prayer book, but have tried to capture something of that in our local context. But these are, frankly, some of the oldest liturgies in the church, just bar none, from all the different services that we do. So they really have a deep, deep history and are very evocative for thousands of years.
Thank you.
Any other questions, thoughts, ideas?
Yeah, my thought is that every year I learn something more through this walk, this journey that we take. So, and actually, we did have the opportunity a couple years ago to go to Jerusalem and to Israel this time of the year, and did get to walk through the streets and do the stations. And so it's really, it really makes it even more meaningful having made that particular journey. But I really appreciate I just want to say I really appreciate all your efforts, all the efforts of the clergy and the staff to support us in this most holy journey this week. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
And I would give a shout out too to our lay leaders who are making worship happen, to our altar guild, to seeing folks who've done, I've seen a sketch of what the altar of repose is going to look like, you know, replete with moss and draping vines. It was just, I think, I know that your fellow parishioners are bringing their creativity to bear to craft in the ways in which we can transcendent worship experiences. And Paul Ashdown asked in the chat about Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday and Holy Week, and there are, our lectionary provides particular daily readings for those. And so I would commend in your own prayer life that you might observe those. In some contexts, there is, so some communities, I've served in communities where there's daily Eucharist. I believe we did this, was it the years are running together. 2 years ago, we had daily Eucharist in Holy Week. And there's also a service called Tenebre that many communities will have in Holy Week on perhaps a Tuesday evening. It is a service of reading of scriptures and followed with interestingly, the extinguishing of candles until there is just one candle remaining that is removed from the space, that then often there's a great clattering loud noise or doors will burst open and this light comes back into the darkened space. It is this reminder of, it's this little foretaste and teaser of entering the tomb and Jesus bursting forth from the tomb, that light of God. Again, not being overcome by darkness.
Elizabeth Marie, if I could just throw in there, since I know you, Paul, and you might be tickled by this, Wednesday in Holy Week is often called Spy Wednesday, and the readings tend to focus on Judas and the sort of betrayal, the act is sort of going on behind the scenes. So there's Spy Wednesday as well. So if you want to mark Spy Wednesday, we have not offered you a liturgy for that, but I'm sure you could do it yourself.
Maybe the spot museum.
And I'll throw in that Holy Tuesday, we get the readings of Jesus upending the tables in the temple. Yeah. And that's a very exciting text to sit with in the context of this week as well. When you think about holy trouble and the ways in which Jesus was really had these different faces, right, of leadership. There was both the sort of the humble aspects and the healing parts, and then there was some righteous anger that's expressed in that moment, and that's a part of the story too.
Elizabeth Marie, could I just throw in there, because I'm not sure we said it as explicitly as we could, with that outdoor altar of repose, you're all invited to come and be a part of that. It will be outdoors, we'll have seats available, and it will be open to you to come the evening after the Maundy Thursday service, which will be live streamed at 7 p.m. The altar of repose will be available after that for people to come to the church and have some time of prayer. And the chairs will be spaced out, and we'd ask everybody to keep their masks on and do all those good things we now know how to do. But you will come and get to see, hopefully, and participate in that watch and to see that beautiful altar.
Yes, in our churchyard, outdoors. Great.
I had a question. I know we mentioned the Stations of the Cross. I guess I had a couple questions. Sort of, I've never prayed those before, but I've read them, and I was wondering sort of about their history, because I know a couple of the stations don't come from the gospel. So I was wondering what that was, and then how do you pray them? Maybe I'll learn on Friday, but I was wondering what it meant to pray those.
I hope you are able to come on Friday. Amanda, do you want to say anything about the history of a non-gospel station?
I'm not sure I'm actually the best.
Okay. I saw you nodding, and I thought you might.
No, I was remembering that they were there, but
yes.
Noah? Well, I was just going to say, as with many of these stories that are told and then retold, there become other stories that get associated and worked into them. So as I look at them, I have some in my office. There's the various falling, and then there's the Veronica wiping the face of Jesus. I won't say it's an extrapolation, but they're extra canonical in the sense of stories that come from outside the Bible, but have been worked into the reimagining of this story and how it went. And there are places within Jerusalem that are marked along this way of the cross that come and commemorate these things. So I don't have the exact date of when each event or sort of extra canonical activity was added to that list. Others of you on the call you may know more than I do about this, but I do know that it was sort of part of the story as it was being told from those early years.
And I think that for me, as I did have the great privilege of traveling to Jerusalem when I was in seminary, and so did walk the Via Dolorosa and prayed those stations in the places where we imagine that these events might have taken place, and that I would suggest have been sacralized in folks then practicing their piety in those places. You know, was this the exact place where Jesus was laid after he died? I don't know, but does the touch, do the kisses, do the tears, do the gathered prayers of individuals over 1,600 years, do they begin to make those places holy if it wasn't the exact spot? Perhaps. And so one of the things I think the Stations of the Cross does for us is it invites us to remember in a bodily sense that motion, that walk, those final days that Jesus undertook. And it's a way for us to recreate here. So much of our liturgies are about trying to recreate what we cannot do because you cannot physically go to Jerusalem. So how, even from the layout of churches, so how do we make, a holy experience in what we can access? And so I think that's one of the invitation of the prayers is we can't go walk the Via Dolorosa this year in Jerusalem, but can we inhabit that space in this context and in our prayerful imaginations endeavor to access that?
I wanted to say in answer to, or kind of response to Noah's thing earlier about this is a week of high drama in many ways.
Yeah.
In the Dark Ages, when drama or theater was prohibited, outlawed, the first reappearance of it was around 960 AD in something called the Quim Quiritus trope, which took place in the cathedral during the Stations of the Cross walk, where the Marys would go and say, and the angel would say in front of the tomb, "Whom do you seek? Quim Quiritus." And that's the first recorded drama in like 500 years. And then it evolved from that to the Great Mystery Cycles and other theater.
Thank you. I think I see Barb's hand and Robert's hand.
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead,
I just wanted to go back. I appreciate Noah bringing that out about Spy Wednesday, but it also makes me wonder how does that fit in with, I understand what's Judas, but what does that do for Judas? Does that mean, tell us about that, where that fits in and how that maybe fits into Judas even being forgiven. I don't know.
I'm not sure if Spy Wednesday ends with Judas being forgiven, although Matthew will tell you in his account that he repents and feels bad about what he did. The other Gospels do not. Judas is a fascinating character. I think what it tries to do, these Holy Week readings, try to, again, we hear the whole thing on Palm Sunday, one of the three synoptic versions. And then I think they try to zoom in on particular characters or particular moments within that story. And so they slow it down and try to go a little bit deeper. And because Judas has this pivotal moment in the drama, that his role is really essential to setting this whole thing in motion, I think they have to devote a day to him. I wouldn't say it's a day of devotion to Judas, it's a day of devotion to his part in the narrative. And so I'm not sure that it would count as a redemption of Judas and his character and his actions. But he forms a fascinating character which to study and meditate on and pray about, because it certainly is a very interesting role.
Robert.
I wanted to pick up, Elizabeth Marie, on what you just said about the sites in Jerusalem and whether they were exactly the ones that have been visited and prayed and so forth. And you use the word that they've been sacralized. I would extend that to say that's exactly the same phenomenon that happens in our own church. That it's one of the reasons that, even though we're doing so much virtually this year, that we're able to do pieces of this where we can come and be there, because the church, our holy spaces, including the garden, are sacralized also by the fact that these are where we experience birth through baptism, marriage, death, the Eucharist, week by week. And so I anticipate that next year, when we are able to do the full-fledged Holy Week and Triduum particularly, I think that's going to be enormously powerful for us all.
Yes. And I think too, thinking about using our grounds and our gardens, given that we have a cemetery here on the ground, so we are physically in this sort of thin place in our liturgical life, walking amongst those saints who have gone before us. I mean, it's a powerful and profound reminder of the cycles of life in the context of the cycle of our liturgical year, in the context of Christ's death and resurrection. There are many layers sort of turning in on one another. Yeah. Any other questions or comments that folks might have? Barbara.
I know in the past, I don't know in this congregation, but actually experiencing the Passover or celebrating the Passover meal. I don't know where that fits in anywhere, but I guess I'm thinking, having been the student of the Bible of the year or in the year, this process of walking through it, it's like parallel to the Jewish people who over and over again, remember the God taking them out of the desert and to the promised land. So this is, that fits in from that standpoint too, of us remembering what God has done all along in our history. And so this is the next phase of God's entering into our world, the incarnation. And anyway, the parallel.
And so many of those visual readings remind us of the ways in which God has acted in history for God's people. It's really powerful. Amanda?
Which I'll just say, we parallel in the Vigil, which I think is really the sort of fun thing about the Triduum is that, we sort of have this meal together in Maundy Thursday, right? And then we have this reading and remembrance from the Old Testament in the Vigil. So I think we really take parts of that in our Triduum experience.
And as Robert referenced, sort of space being so important to us, I just wanted to remind folks that we're preparing our nave for some much needed cleaning, replastering, and painting. And so in the future, when you return, you will not have a piece of the church float down into your hair, for instance, or onto the altar. But so that work, our spaces, both the church is the gathered people, and we have holy spaces where we tend, where these significant sacred life events and the celebration of the Eucharist have taken place over time and over decades. And so know that we are seeking to care for and tend those spaces. And we'll give you updates along the way. It's been pretty exciting seeing some of the furniture in the chancel moved out, and you realize just how big our space is. It's really quite large.
Elizabeth Marie, if I can just piggyback on that and say, I think one of the things for all of us as we've tried in this now second round of going through Holy Week and Easter and Lent, most of Lent, in this pandemic, has been, I've been overwhelmed with a feeling of gratitude for our spaces. And we've now been forced to try to use them creatively and perhaps rediscovered or reinvigorated certain spaces on our campus that are not just our church nave, that can be used for worship or prayer in such a way that I think we've flexed some creative muscles, but hopefully created new opportunities for us to continue to use and value our campus moving forward. So it's been a great tool to assist us in reimagining these services this year, because we do have such a great gift of this little corner of our campus that's really quite special. So I hope you're all able to join us in some point for some in-person worship this week.
Yes. And I would also add use of the created world. There's some children and family Stations of the Cross that are out in the Arboretum, some images from the Arboretum. Those can be for anybody. You do not have to be a child to appreciate an image, the beauty and the powerful symbolism in creation itself. All right, any final questions? All right. Well, I want to thank you all for taking time to be present with us this morning as we are on this sacred journey of Holy Week together. And for those of you whom we will see on our live stream, we look forward to being with you. It's that moment of you can see us, but we can't see you. And for those of you whom we will see in person on Easter at 7:30, 11, 1, 3, or 5, we look forward with joy to celebrating with you and proclaiming that good news using the A word. So we will look forward to that with you. And we will see you all soon. Take care and go in peace.